Hello, everyone, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Apologies for the bit of the delay there. We had some technical difficulties. Mercury is not in retrograde yet, but it will be soon, and so watch out for your computers. Thank you all for joining us today for another edition of Webinar Wednesday. My name is Ria Stark. I'm the Digital Engagement Manager here at TLC, and it is that time of year again, not just sweater weather, but the library catalogs are starting to come in. We're getting some more book lists, and a lot of our libraries are experiencing a little more slower times this time of year to be able to do a lot more projects. So to bring in the new year, we're going to go book shopping, one of my favorite things, and I have a couple of experts joining us here today to talk you through what that looks like in Library.Solution. So bundle up, grab your hot cocoa, and stay tuned because we've got quite a treat in store for you today. But before we jump in, I have my usual reminders for everybody. We are live this afternoon, and as a participant of our live webinar, you have the opportunity to ask our panelists questions. So if you think of anything that you want to ask or a story you'd like to share, please add that into the questions panel and we will address those at the end of this session. If you would like to rewatch this webinar later or share it with a colleague, we absolutely encourage that. You can catch the replay starting tomorrow at tlcdelivers.com/webinars. I'll share that link again at the end of our presentation. And before you log out, just be sure to grab those handouts for more information about the services we'll be discussing today. All right, those are my reminders. Now, my panelists with me today are Gerry Davies, our Senior Library Consultant, and Phillip Green, our Library.Solution Sales Engineer and a frequent flyer here at Webinar Wednesday. They're going to show you what it looks like to purchase new materials in Library.Solution from beginning to end. And guys, thank you so much for joining us here today for Webinar Wednesday.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and get started first with a poll. So in just a moment, you will see a question appear on your screen. That should be coming up. And we would like to know, what tools does your library use for collection development? And please check all that apply. So are you using your ILS reports? Are you using shelf inventory? Do you create weeding and missing lists to figure out what you want to purchase? Are you looking at holds ratios? Are you using any sort of third-party analysis tool? Whatever that looks like, go ahead and give us some check marks and submit that poll. If it's something else you're using, feel free to add that into the questions panel as well. We're very curious to know. We can only put 5 options in, so if there's something else we missed, go ahead and add that into the questions panel. We'll take a look. All right, looks like we're getting some great responses. Watching the results come in so far, everyone has said weeding and missing lists so far. So yep, 100% are using weeding and missing lists. That's good to know. 43% are using their ILS reports, 71% are doing shelf inventory, and 14% for both holds ratios and third-party analysis tools. So good information to have. All right, and I will pass it over to you, Gerry, to give us some good information.
Okay, all right. So let's start when I was quite surprised at the number of missing and weeding listings that are there. So actually, I think we'll start by taking a brief look at inventory in our system and how you can use that to identify. It's great to say, well, we need, based on what we have in our collection, we need to purchase the following. But perhaps the first thing to do is to say, is it actually in our collection? Is it actually there on the shelf? Has it disappeared and we can't find it? That may be the first part of your solution. So on that, I'm going to pass over to Phillip, and he's going to give us a brief overview of inventory and how that can be one of the steps in looking at collection development for you. So over to you, Phillip.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Ria, just give me control of the screen and we'll get it going here.
Yep, one moment, apologies. All right, you should be presenter now.
All right, here we go. So inventory, as you all know, is a live inventory like it has been for several years now. LS2 inventory, if you haven't used it recently, has a couple fantastic features, and I'm going to point a few of those out as I get started here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to begin a new inventory. I just have a small collection for demonstration purposes. But one of the things I want to mention while I'm adding collections to my inventory is that you can actually inventory multiple collections at the same time. So if you have, what we typically see is mixing large print with standard print materials and they're in the same stacks, you can create an inventory which is your standard, we'll say general fiction and your large print fiction, and you can combine those. Also, you can have several staff members conducting inventory at the same time. So you can have multiple folks working through the same shelves and working inventory much faster and more quickly that way. You also have the option to notify the user when there is an item that is out of place. So I'm going to just keep it real basic for today's purposes, and to start off real quick. Again, if you're not familiar with the new LS2 inventory, you can see that even though I haven't started scanning anything, I have 5 of 10 items accounted for. And what that means is these are items that we know are either maybe in storage, they were marked lost or missing by a staff member, they might be on the arrived hold shelf. So it's stating that at this exact moment when I start inventory, it's already accounted for some of my items. So let's go ahead and scan a few here. So we have a good scan there. Now this is an item that was lost, so that's very helpful to know. Again, I may have had that in an order list, but now that I have found the item, I don't need to buy more of those. So you can see as I have errors occurring, they are highlighted in red. So these are items that I can then add to my note or add to my list, which OSA, which we're going to see in just a few minutes, has the ability to create an Excel spreadsheet template for you. So when you see items that are highlighted in red, maybe they're lost, they were not on the shelf, or you complete your inventory like I'm going to do now, and it's going to tell me that 2 items are missing. What I can do is get that missing item report and add those to my template for my OSA acquisitions order later. So using inventory to generate a list of items that are missing can be helpful when creating these lists of items to reorder for the new year. So that's a way inventory can be used to build lists and to create collection development lists to order new materials again. And with that being said, we'll go back to Gerry for his portion of the presentation.
Okay. Ria, let me know when people can see me again. See my screen.
I'm making you presenter right now. So you can go ahead and share your screen again.
Show my screen again. Okay, so you should see the same collection development inventory screen there.
Yep, there you are.
Okay, fine, wonderful. Just want to make sure. Okay, so with that, so inventory is one way of looking at it. Let's go and look at some alternatives as well. Within the advanced search in our cataloging module, there's a lot of searching and reporting that you can do there. Just as you might use listen actions in the staff client, within cataloging, you can use advanced searches to do lots of things. So here I am looking in classification of 100s, so I'm interested in philosophy. I've also refined that by a subject of philosophy. In the adult nonfiction collection, I'm looking in the main library, and I am looking for circulations of more than 2 in the lifetime. And so with this, I can see that I can use advanced searches to start looking at what's available in my collection and how much it's been used. So there's an example there. We've got philosophy for beginners. Okay, another way of doing it, as I mentioned just now, was using listen actions within the staff client. And again, I can do something similar here. And this is a very easy tool, just as the cataloging one is. And you'll see I've set checkouts here for more than 1 or 2. I've set a subject here, as you can see on this particular one, contains the word philosophy. I've set a location, I've set a collection, and I can run a report. And in this case, I've got 18 items here. I can then save those to a list, to a spreadsheet, and work from there with that. So there's using lists and actions for developing collections. A third way, of course, is using Cognos Reports. And there's a collection turnover by classification. So I can see my 100s or my 100s there, the number of items I have and the checkouts. Not too much in this particular report, as you can see. And then a third way of doing it would be to use collection development. This is actually a purchase alerts report. And this one was run from Cognos and produced as an Excel spreadsheet. And with that, I've downloaded it and I can go and run from that. So again, this would be a purchase alerts. This would be based on a ratio that I defined of holds to items. So there you have that using Cognos. With that, I will pass back to Ria again, and we'll have another poll.
Thanks, Gerry. So one more poll pop up on your screen before we jump into more of the acquisition side of it. Wondering how you all create your carts for new acquisitions. Are you gathering those from the vendor's website? Are you using acquisitions tools like TLC's OSA, which we're about to show you? Maybe you don't use acquisitions. Go ahead and select that option. Or is there something else you're using? And if so, please let us know in the questions panel. We're very curious to find out more information from you there. And also, if you are using vendors' websites, if you want to add into that questions panel which vendors you're using as well, it's always nice to know where people are getting their acquisitions from. Yep, so we've got about 60% so far say that they don't use it. Okay, that's good to know. So 20% and 20% for vendors versus acquisitions. So for those of you who don't use it so far, you're in for a treat to see what we are capable of doing with TLC's online selection and acquisition service, aka OSA. So, oops, Gerry, I'm seeing your desktop. Let's go back to the presentation for just a moment.
Yes. Where has it gone? Give me a second. It was there, and it has. I appear to have lost my screen. Okay, that's odd.
Yeah, one moment, everyone. We'll go ahead and switch over.
I think when we swapped over to the other thing, hold on. This might be it here. Okay, sorry.
Yep, there you are. You're back.
There you go. I got too many desktops, too many virtual desktops on my actual desktops. Okay, so passing on from the poll, we will go on and look at this. So searching for subjects and authors. Online, OSA, of course, stands for Online Selection and Acquisitions. So there are a number of ways that I can start creating lists or looking for titles. One is from within OSA. And one of them is by going to a vendor website and creating carts of materials and using the tools that are available with your preferred vendors. So let's start by looking at what we can do with OSA. OSA has a Z3950 broadcast search engine in it. So you can search across any Z3950 target that you wish. In this case, I'm using OSA, and you'll see here that I am looking for books on philosophy as a subject, and the author is going to be Russell. That's not Russell Brand, that's Bertrand Russell, for those of you who know. And in this case, I can see that I've got 14 hits in my local database, nothing on order, nothing in any lists. OSA will tell you if someone else is creating a list of titles. Even if they haven't ordered it yet, it will show you what lists have been created as well as what orders have actually been placed. So I have nothing going there, so I know no one else is duplicating my work. And now I'm seeing for Baker and Taylor 129 and for Ingram 679 hits for a subject of philosophy and an author of Bertrand Russell. So at this point, I could add that to a list if I wished. The other way of doing things, well, again, I've just dived into Baker and Taylor here, and so I can see a couple of titles here. So I've selected Problems of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, and I'm going to add that to an order or to a list, which I'll create into an order. The other way of doing things, of course, is to go in and go to your preferred vendor, create a cart and use the tools that they have online, create a cart of titles, and then save them and import them into OSA, into acquisitions. And it works something like this. You would save your cart. The vendor would post it to an FTP site. OSA can be set up to automatically go to the vendor FTP site multiple times a day, look for new orders or look for new carts, and then import them back into OSA. Whether I'm creating a list from within OSA or I'm importing a cart from a vendor, what I end up with is a list like this. And a list is essentially the same as an order, except it hasn't actually been ordered. That's the key difference between them. So in this case, you see I've got two titles here, and we'll focus on the first one, Problems of Philosophy. It has an item number there. We've got an MRCP, discounted price, quantity, and if we look in more detail, we can see a little bit more about this particular title. Again, there's an item number there. We've got ISBNs, we've got vendors, prices, and I'm going to display this in the OPAC after the order's been released, and I'm going to allow holds on it. Okay, so with that, I have created an order, and I've captured a brief vendor record. In this case, it's a fairly nasty record, particularly short one, and I really would like to do something more than that with it. We'll come back to that in a second. So within OSA, we would create our order. We would add our quantities and prices. We would put in the fund accounts and collection codes that we're going to be assigning to this. In fact, we can actually load our fund accounts and collection codes within the cart that we've created within the orders. Most of those vendors will call them things like templates or grids. So you can set those up so that the cart itself will include the fund account you wish to pay for it from and the fund and the collection code that you wish the item to go into. So there's my order with an OSA, and at that point I would order. Except in this case, of course, OSA is saying, well, hold on a second, you need more money. You have exceeded your threshold for encumbrances. You need to deal with that first. So I go off and deal with that, and I come back and I place my order. You can see in this case, I've got two titles, two items. They're going to be pre-processed with Baker and Taylor. I've got my amount to encumber, and you'll see that it's posted a PO number there. That is a system generated one, but as you can see, you're in a position where you could go in right now and put in a preferred PO number rather than the one you want to use. Notice I have a list name here. It's hundreds purchases, and it has a list ID. So at this point, I'm turning that list into an order, and I can complete that order. Okay. Now, OSA is live, and normally I would send that off EDI. I don't want to do that and actually send an order. So in this case, we've set it up just to show you a printout of a purchase order for you. Okay. All right. So with that, the next step really is to think, well, hold on, I've placed a hold now. Many of you probably want to show on order titles in the OPAC. So with OSA, one of the things that you can do is, if we look at this left-hand screen here, I can see that I've got options, automatic options as to when my on-order records display in the PAC. In this case, I've said after the order has been released. Okay, so I've released it, whether I've transmitted it or not, but I have released this order. I've also said that I wish to allow holds. Okay, if I go into these records after I've done the place the order, you can see that I've got the information here. You can see that this on order record was sent to the PAC on the 3rd of December. It's displaying in the PAC now, and also that I've allowed holds to be placed on this title. The bottom image there, you can actually see where within OSA, you can set options for checked items. So I could place a hold on an item that is on order. In fact, I can also place a hold on an item that hasn't been ordered yet. So if I'm creating patron requests, I can take a patron request, create a list of patron requests within acquisitions, attach holds for individual patrons to those patron requests, and then if I decide to actually order it, those holds would follow through into the actual order and onto the on order status. So they would show up in the OPAC and you would see holds attached to it at that time. And again, notice here that we're clicking here for the MARC record. That's the brief record at the moment. Okay, and again, allow holds if applicable. So with that, I'm going on to the next step. So one of the steps that most libraries struggle with is overlaying the brief order record with a full MARC record from your preferred sources, whether that's going out to Bookware, whether that's using its MARC, whether you're off to WorldCat with OCLC, or you are going to your favorite public library and availing yourself of their records. What OSA can do is, however, it can automate that process. So this is the clever bit of our system. So we can take an order like this one here, and typically those order records have a brief, nasty, brutish little record, and we really need to replace that with something better. So what we can do is we can take that brief order record, and we have a utility called a MARC source profile configuration. What this says is take that brief record, go out to these sources of MARC records. These are the Z3950 targets. They are sources I use for MARC records. And I have said search those sources in this order. Continue down that list until I get a hit of a full MARC record. When I do, overlay my brief order record with the record I found in my preferred sources. Again, this hierarchy can be set up as you wish with your preferred vendors. I can even have multiple profiles, so I could have a different profile for AV or a different profile for foreign language materials. Okay, so with that, the system will go off, it will find a better record and replace it with something better. So what does that mean? Instead of having the record on the left, which is my brief record from Baker and Taylor, I believe, instead I've got a full record on the right. I think this one may have come from OCLC. Yes, it did. If I look at the 003 there, and you can see the difference in what's available there, especially all the 650s. Okay, so with that, we'll move on to another poll. Ria, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gerry. That's looking good so far. I did see that we have a question come in. I'm going to go ahead and hold that until the end of the session. So if you think of any other questions in the meantime, be sure to add them into that questions panel. For now, our question for you with this poll is, where does your library get its most complete MARC records? So as Gerry just showed, the brief record versus the fuller record, we're curious to know where your final records are coming from. Are you getting them just from the vendor and leaving them as is? Are you getting resources or from resources like TLC's its MARC to be able to copy, catalog, and clean those up? Do you have a full-time original cataloger on staff who's creating those records? Is there another option? Again, please tell that in the questions panel. Or if you're not sure, that last option is for you to see where you're getting your most complete MARC records. And so far, about 83%, yep, are coming from its MARC. That's great to hear, and 17% from the vendor.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Oops, we are seeing your desktop again. It must be the poll. We just keep breaking it.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Right.
So that's good to know. So those of you who are using its MARC, and the vast majority of you, you can use acquisitions to find full MARC records and put them in the catalog. They may not be the final record you're going to use, but they are a record that can at least populate the catalog in the meantime while the item is on order. So let's go ahead and look at the ordering process a little bit within OSA. So the next thing is, if you think about it, we have ordered these items. We have added them to the catalog. It's displaying either an on-order record, or if we're using OSA, OSA can overlay that with a full MARC record from a preferred source. Now I'm in the position of receiving a packing slip and actually reconciling that with my original order. So in this case, I'm going to go off and I'm going to populate that packing slip with list. My list name was 100's purchases. So I'm going to do that. And now I'm in a position to start receiving those items. And they're coming in from Bertrand Russell. Not Russell Brand, but Bertrand Russell. So in this case, you see I'm accepting 1 unit for each of those. I ordered each of those. I can click here on the list ID and see the original list that form the order, or I can click here on details and I can see the almost like the bib record screen for that as well. So I add those items to my packing slip, and then I can move on to my invoicing. Now, in this case, what we've done with OSA, we've split invoicing and receiving into 2 separate steps. That's typically something, depending on the size of your library, that your auditors may demand. We've just set it up as separate steps in this case, just to make it clearer. So I've received 1 item of each, and now I'm in a position to invoice. The cost of the item, is that correct? That's what we thought it was when we ordered. Is that actually what the receipt says, the invoice says? I can then go back and look at the quantities that have been shipped. Maybe this is the second part of a partial shipment. I can also go off and look at the original order again. And again, I can look at the individual record for this title, this order record. So I can do that. I can complete my invoice. And at this point, I can go off and complete my invoice. Now, one of the things that you can do with OSA, and all of you like to know, there is an undo button. So if you complete an invoice and then decide, oops, I wrote off $10 because it was different from the order, and then find out that you've made an error or something else has gone on, you can undo that invoice and complete it again with new line items. Okay, so that's completing the invoice with OSA. Now, some of you will be thinking at the moment, well, hold on a second. There's a salesman. He's just gone off and said, we're going to have an automatic process. Decide what MARC record is going into my system, going into my catalog. A cataloger may say, no, I want to know what record is going in. It may be coming from a source that I'm happy with, but that source may have multiple ISBNs, multiple records there, and I want to make sure that the system has chosen the best record, in my opinion. So what I can do here is, within the advanced search of cataloging, I can go off and I can say, well, I'm going to look for all items that were added after the 1st of December in the adult collections, and I'm looking in the main library. And with that, I then see titles that have been ordered, and then I can see 2 of the titles that I'm looking at. In this case, you remember we were looking at the problems of philosophy. So at this point, I can click on that. What I can actually do is to say, show me the record, or let me look at alternatives. So on this screen, this is cataloging doing a Z3950 search and reselecting a match. It's going off and looking at my targets, my local database here. I have my its MARC database. I can look in OCLC WorldCat. I can look at MetaMark Z, and then I can go off to my preferred public libraries or whatever and find the records I'm looking for. Isn't it funny how someone calls when you're trying to do a presentation? So in this case, I'm in OCLC WorldCat, and I found 2 candidates here. So at this point, within the cataloging record, I can pull those 2 up and look at them and decide which is the target record. Maybe I found a record, or OSA found a record, and it was the first full record it found, but I found another one that I prefer. And those of us who use WorldCat will probably looking at the number of holding symbols attached to a WorldCat record and go with the majority and say, well, this one's got 400 attached to it, and this one has 2 holding statements attached to it. I'll go with the one with 400. And in this case, I can select that title. I can remove the comparison, and any information that is attached to the order record can be moved from the inferior record and copied across to the superior record. That would include not just my acquisitions data, but if anyone had placed holds on that item, those would move as well. And obviously all my item data. So all of that can be done, and this can be a very useful thing in cataloging so that you can overview this automated process that OSA's done. It may be that if it's another James Patterson novel, you look at that and you go, it's good enough, we don't care. But if you can do that without having to touch every single bib record that's imported into the system, if you just review it briefly and say, yep, that's fine, then you have bought yourself time to look at non-fiction adult titles and perhaps go in and add additional value to those records as a professional cataloger. So that's the beauty of OSA when it comes to the automated process of overlaying brief order records with full ones. If 5 times out of 10 it finds a record that's good enough, to use a phrase my old colleague used to say, mark it and park it, then I have bought myself perhaps 10 or 20 minutes or more to spend on improving the records that can actually benefit from my expertise as a cataloger. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Phillip, and we will look briefly at cataloging, and we'll look at just a couple of things that typically you might want to do as a cataloger to enhance this record in terms of, I've pulled it across from whatever source I wanted to. It's MARC, looks like is likely for many of you. Maybe I want to go in now, I've got the time to improve that record. So let's look at the problems of philosophy. And at this point, I'll pass over to Phillip.
Phillip, I'll go ahead and make you the presenter now.
Sounds good. There we go.
Right.
And have my screen correct?
Yep, we're seeing LS2 cataloging.
All right. So Gerry's book, The Problems of Philosophy, one of the things that you may want to do, first off, if you haven't updated to version 5.6 or greater, the thing I want to mention is enhanced content now displays in LS2 cataloging, so you can see all the additional content that will be displayed to your patrons in the PAC before you even begin to enhance and enrich the record. So that's one thing I'd like to mention that can be very helpful. And again, as Gerry was talking to, a time saver to give you additional time on your hands for other higher value tasks. So the example that we wanted to mention here was, and also point out a feature if you're not real familiar with LS2 cataloging, is the real-time glossaries and enhancing the record with subject data, because subject data is very important for the searching and discoverability of your items within the catalog for your patrons. So in this example, what we want to do here is I want to add some additional subject headings. So we'll look at logic. So we'll add logic as a subject heading. And also we're going to add mathematics. And you can see as I type, it gives me the proper capitalization, punctuation, etc. Those are real-time glossaries coming from the MARC service via the MARC store database. The other thing I want to mention with MARC is I just learned today we are now over 80 million MARC records available via MARC. And also for your electronic resources, keep in mind if you're not already using it for the same price you pay to the third-party vendors, you can get an eBibliophile record. So that is an RDA enhanced TLC quality record for your electronic resources. So those are some additional services and features that are available to you as a TLC customer.
So those subject headings and all of your authority controlled headings, whether they are authors or subjects, all of those are being updated weekly from LC. So our MARC authority database, the glossaries, they are updated weekly from LC. So they're always up to date. Essentially, you're working with a 1-week-old copy of the live LC authority file.
Yep, so we're always just a couple days behind LC, so you don't have to worry about it being out of date before you even complete your cataloging. So now that I've made my adjustments here, I can save this as a draft. If I would like to come back to it at a later time, I can immediately publish it to the database. And I also get the option to view the reconstructed MARC formatted file. I'm going to save this as a draft because what I want to do real quick here is go back to my workspace and show in real time that feature Gerry was just talking about, which is the match again. So we can go out to MARC or WorldCat or our favorite public library. And you also have the option to preview that record before you save it back to your workspace. So you don't have to download the file or save it back before you can begin working with it. You can preview it and make sure it's going to be the best fit for your library. And again, to show what Gerry was talking about here earlier, advanced search, we have the option for looking at titles and items with a particular status. I just wanted to show how quick this works for you in real time. So I want to look at on order items and we'll search. And these are my items, and then I can filter out and just go to the title level record as well. You can also see the item in the PAC. So I like to show an example. Oh, there's my spell check working for me. So here's Steely Blue. That's an on order record, and you can see because I've enabled the feature, I have the option to place a hold.
Okay.
And Gerry, was there something else we wanted to mention here?
I think the only other thing to mention, the only other thing I would want to mention in terms of the authorities is that you saw there that when Phillip was selecting logic as an authority, he was jumping into the its mark display. And you'll notice that on the right-hand side, I'll wait for him to dive into it again. So there we are, logic and mathematics. So if you click on that, now you're seeing, actually, Phillip, if you can go to the logic one at the top there, yeah. You'll see we've got its mark, but notice obviously you can also look at the local authorities there. So if you have local authorities that you want to do, then you can create those or you can select from those. So again, I don't want you to think that you have to use an LC subject heading. Again, there'll be many cases where you want to create your own subject headings or your own authors if it's local information that you want to add, or in the example of subjects, perhaps you're trying to create additional subjects that form an index that will help your patrons find things in an easy to use way. So that was the only other thing I wanted to mention was you've got two choices there when it comes to the glossaries. Okay, I think that's about it. So what you've seen there then is essentially in buying books, you've got lots of different options in terms of purchasing and collection development. You can certainly use OSA to do that. You can do that to search across multiple vendors and build lists. One of the things that I should have mentioned also with OSA was that as part of the selection tool that it has, it gives privilege levels. So you can create up to 10 levels within OSA of privileges so that people can create lists, but not for other locations or only for specific collection codes, or nominate specific fund accounts or nominate specific vendors. Or maybe they're not allowed to do any of those things and all they can do is create a list. But you have a feature within the OSA that will allow selections to move up the food chain, so to speak, so that someone can only create a list, but it can be passed to someone else who can flesh it out with collection code, fund account, vendor information. They can pass it up to someone else who approves it. Someone else then can be passing it up to the person who actually hits the button and does the ordering. So you've got a whole filtering system there that allows a large number of staff and in fact creating lists from patron suggestions, and that can filter up to the point where someone actually approves and sends an order out. So that can be very useful. And again, the other thing with OSA is the ability for you to create carts in your preferred environments with other vendors, book vendors, and then import them into OSA without having to recreate that information again in OSA. So OSA really can speed up your process. It can allow you to do your ordering. It can allow you to manage selections. It can do your copy cataloging for you. And pretty much without any effort at all, it does all your encumbering and fund accounting for you, almost free of charge, so to speak. So on that, I'll pass over to Ria, I think, for any last words.
Yeah, thank you, Gerry. I definitely like more of the physical book purchasing side, as you can see from my background. I like to have a clean book in hand, but it's so nice to be able to see the back end and to see what actually happens in the system to make those books available for libraries and for their communities. So thank you both for the demonstration. As Phillip is showing on the screen here, this is the link to our webinars page, tlcdelivers.com/webinars. This is where you will be able to catch the recording starting tomorrow for this webinar, as well as any of our archived ones as well. So with that, we do have a couple of questions that are coming in. I'll go ahead and ask those in just a second. In the meantime, I do have one last poll for everybody. This is the one we ask at the end of every webinar, which is whether or not you would like more information. So we will go through the questions. If you want more information now, feel free to ask a question. But if you're looking to get more information about OSA or some of the other services we've mentioned today, please go ahead and hit that first button. Yes, please contact me, and we'll be sure to follow up with you following this webinar. Otherwise, not at this time. We understand. So the first question that has come in, you'd swear this was a planted question, but it's not. And so Gretchen, thanks for asking a great question, which is, we inventory with an RFID scanner, which reads the barcodes on books and exports a file of barcode numbers. So Gerry, could this work with the LS2 inventory tool? Could you speak to that,
Yes.
please?
Yes, actually, I'll probably bring Phillip into this as well. But yes, it can work in with that. And TLC, some of you may know, owns a RFID company, TechLogic. So we certainly understand RFID technology, and it does dovetail nicely with the inventory module there. So again, you can do live scanning of RFID tags, and inventory will read those and pull them up. The other thing I think that we should mention also is that the inventory module can also recognize SIP transactions. So if you are doing RFID and you're doing circulation, those circulation transactions are reported through SIP, and SIP can be used to update inventory, so that the inventory module can say, yes, I've already accounted for 20% of this inventory because I have seen those items as a SIP transaction in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, that can be useful, but certainly RFID we can work with. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Phillip, did you want to add anything to that as well?
Nope, that was great. Thanks, Gerry.
Yeah. Absolutely. Some of our development work that we did for 5.6 includes work that Gerry mentioned to integrate with TechLogic's CircTrack wand. So those two work very nicely hand in hand, but of course with any other RFID scanners as well. This next question is about MARC. So when we were showing those different databases to pull information from, can you maybe speak more to what that service is for those audience members who don't know about MARC?
Okay. Well, MARC is TLC started off in 1974 as a cataloging company. In fact, the first CD in the world that didn't play music was actually an MARC CD of cataloging records, copy cataloging records. So the first data on a CD in the world was actually MARC, or our bibliophile system as it was called back then. So essentially what we have is a range of databases that are part of an MARC subscription. There are also a couple of premium databases available as well that you can add for additional price. But essentially, it's a source of MARC records. It's not as comprehensive as WorldCat, but then it's not a WorldCat size subscription to it either. It's certainly a very handy and very applicable middle path for the average public library, who on one side is going off to bookware or manually going off and looking for MARC records, spending a lot of time doing it. Perhaps you don't know the real cost in person hours of finding those MARC records. And at the same time, you can't afford $20,000 or $30,000 a year for an OCLC cataloging subscription. So MARC for a few $1,000s can give you access to 80 million MARC records, and they're updated I think pretty much weekly. So that might be a nice middle ground if you want a more automated process for finding records that dovetails very nicely, integrates very nicely with our cataloging module and also with OSA as well. So that would be ITSMARC, unless Philip or Ria has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Philip if you could please navigate to itsmark.com since you're sharing your browser. I did want to mention that we currently have a 30-day trial set up. So if you are interested in trying that out, like Gerry shared, go ahead and jump over to itsmark.com. Justin added that in the chat as well, so you can join. Nice big banner that says 30-day free trial. So if you wanted to test that out, see what those records look like, this is a great opportunity to be able to do so.
And to dovetail into that, I know we have different customer bases here. We also have premium and specialized databases for our school customers, and our public library customers are special category customers. We have MedMarc, we have CanMarc, we have British databases. So there's a wide variety of premium databases that can be added, and you can also have a trial of that upon request.
One other thing to add briefly is for those of you who are looking at our cataloging module and saying, where's the MARC? Where's the text-based? Where are my tags? Where are my subfields? The ITSMARC database subscription includes a free copy of our bibliophile system. Bibliophile is a full MARC editor, a full traditional full text MARC editor, complete with macros and everything else. And so for those of you who would prefer to, perhaps you've got a couple of staff who like to see the shorthand of raw MARC data, then ITSMARC includes bibliophile. Again, that macros included. That was it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we do also, like Gerry mentioned, have 81 million records in ITSMARC right now, and that is special thanks to some of our data contributors. So we do have access to a lot of great new titles that are readily available through ITSMARC. Our last question that's come in so far, if you do have another question, please go ahead and add it. This one's just a confirmation. When you were talking through OSA, was the status automatically updated when the orders were received, or did you have to change that? I think this is talking about going from an on order to an on shelf status.
So that is that, again, I don't think if you can pull back my screen there, I can probably show you that. But yeah, it's automatic. Ria, if you can pull to my screen for a second, I'll show you that one screen.
Yep, I'll make you presenter.
Show my screen. Okay, so you should see display orders in PAC. Holds can be placed. So the small mini screen on the left there, PAC synchronization. So this is an automated process. And so I have the option, what waypoints, what points along my journey, what is the action I do that triggers the automatic downloading of an on-order record into the PAC. So I can set up within OSA, what is it? What action do I do that triggers that in? And in this case, you can see I've said after the order has been released. Now, I could set up to say, no, I don't want items to display in the OPAC until I've received them or until payment's approved. Most people, though, would say, hey, after the order's been released or after I've transmitted that order to the vendor, I want that to automatically show in the catalog. Okay, and you can see on the screen on the right there, displaying the PAC now. So this was done automatically. This record was sent to the PAC at 2:03 on the 3rd of December, and the system did that. And it did that because I released the order, and that was the trigger for the system taking that on order titles and loading them into the PAC. So it's an automatic process. Long-winded answer, but I really wanted to give you an idea of just how many options you have there.
And I want to follow up and add on to that, please. So I think part of that question may or may not have also regarded the availability status. So once the item is received, you would check it in, and it will become available depending on your settings within LS preferences. LS preferences will allow up to a 3-day shelving period. So when you receive an item, you can check it in, and it could be available immediately or have a status in the pack of shelving, and that can display for 1 to 3 days.
Great, thank you. Thank you both. Yeah, it's good to get the clarity and also to have the add-on as well to know what those statuses look like. I'm not seeing any other questions so far, so I think you must have answered everything as you've gone along. So I'll just do some closing reminders. Everyone be sure to grab those handouts before we log out today. If you want some more information, there's some great resources there. If you have any questions or think of something as soon as the webinar is over, it always happens, you can always reach us at info@tlcdelivers.com and ask us there. And we are going to be taking a short break for the holidays. This is our last webinar of the year. Thank you for being part of it. And we will be back in January with some more information about TLC Go, which is our library mobile app that's available for customers. So check back on the website for more information about that soon. Catch the replay of this tomorrow, starting tomorrow at tlcdelivers.com/webinars. And otherwise, thank you both so much for joining us for our webinar. Thank you to our attendees, and happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good holiday. Bye-bye.
See you in the next one.